Hello, welcome this afternoon. My name is Tracy Bannon. I'm a senior architect with Deloitte Consulting. With me is Sebnam. Actually, this interesting story is this is the first time we've met face to face, but although we've been working with each other virtually for quite some time now. So, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, Şebnem Tokcan. I've been with Deloitte almost 6 months. I am a manager aligned with the cloud infrastructure.
So guys, what we want to do today is we want to talk about, share with you, our goal is that you can walk out of here with a bucket of considerations for what you need to consider when you're moving to hybrid cloud. And these are things that you as technology leaders in your firms need to carry forward. Lots of content, not going to go through this. The slides will be available for you. So from a business perspective, we've looked at Gartner, we've looked at our clients, and we understand that in 2016, the bulk of the funding, the bulk of the monies are going to cloud. So if the bulk of the money in 2016 for new IT is going towards cloud, what does that mean? Well, if we add on to that Gartner's suggestion that in 2017, half of all enterprises will have some kind of hybrid cloud, there's an interesting marriage there, right? So there's an imperative. While our enterprises are getting very good at hosting single apps, we know how to put a single app out there if we build it all and architect it all, but that single app doesn't represent my holistic enterprise. So what happens to the holistic enterprise? Means that we have an imperative to talk about hybrid. All right, so this looks like a shameless plug, but it's not. So Deloitte is big, and the reason that that matters for the conversation today is that we have clients in the federal space. I dabble in the federal space. I work at the state level. We're global. Sebnam works in private industry and works with telecoms, a number of different things. And what we're seeing across all of them is that, yes, they have very unique challenges. Everybody has unique challenges, right? Everybody's a snowflake. However, there's a set of common concerns, and I'm just going to keep using that term, concerns. There's a set of common concerns. It's a really big set, and I'm going to want you to take this deck home, but there's a big set of concerns that we want to walk you through. So whenever you start talking about cloud, you need to come up with a definition, right? You always have to have a taxonomy, right? Where do our projects fail because we're not using the same taxonomy? So I want to get a definition of hybrid cloud. So everybody take out your phone or your laptop. I'm not joking. You're actually allowed to open the lids now. So if you have that, what we're going to do is I don't want you Googling. This is not asking you to Google. We're going to try this out, guys. I want you to send text to the number 22333. So that's the number that you're going to aim it at. You're going to start the text with that number, 6078, and I want you to send either a word or a phrase, something that embodies your definition of hybrid cloud. And let's see what happens here. Yes, and rates may apply. Now, I do have a bad word filter on here. Does this imply that y'all are sending bad words? I'll send one too. Can I ask you to hold it?
Yeah. Why don't we test this?
Yep. And we'll give it 60 seconds, and if we don't see anything, guys, we'll chalk it up to connectivity and we'll go on. There we go. I love it. I love it. Let's see what kind of words we're starting to get up here. Services. Wow, services. Magic. Oh, I like magic. By the way, the bigger the word, right? Obviously, the more people who are sending that word. Premises, different systems. Whoa, services, hosting, cloud.
Smoke premises?
This is awesome, guys. All right. Combinated.
premises.
I think somebody put in combined, but Siri is messing with you. All right. So the point here, guys, the point here is look how many different words, look how many different things matter to different people. Look how this is changing just as we talk, because each of you have a different point of view on what hybrid cloud is, right? So I want to suggest to you a really hyper simple, it's not oversimplified, but it's a hyper simple definition. You ready? So a hybrid cloud means that you have something on the other side of the firewall. That's it. This doesn't say what the proportions are. It doesn't mean that I'm telling you that 50% of your enterprise has to be outside. It could be that you have everything inside on your own server except you've decided to wire in Google Analytics. Guess what? You're now leveraging something from the cloud. You have a hybrid cloud. So is everybody good with this definition? Simple definition? No? All right. So when you're talking about hybrid cloud, when you're trying to figure out what your architecture looks like, the biggest part of it is trying to figure out what the best fit is. I'm never going to say best of breed, I'm going to say best fit. What's the best fit? And you have to look across a whole bunch of different dimensions. And these are some of the things. This is a very business-centric view of this, talking about the different as-a-services. You have to make a blend of the as-a-services for your enterprise. What the colors represent is what's your responsibility. So blue is all you, and as you go across that sliding scale, it's how much you are willing to have somebody else be in control of that piece or part. So it's not just a cost concern, right? It's how much are you willing to cede as an enterprise, how much are you willing to cede control to somebody else. And I'll give you a really good story a little bit later about one of our states and how they went through their struggle in ceding control to somebody else. But I'm getting the cart before the horse, so to speak. So that's great. I'm telling you that you have to come up with a mix, right? So you have to come up with a hybrid cloud mix because Gartner says that we're going to be spending a lot of money and everybody's going to have one. So let's take a step back and ask, why? What's the imperative? Why am I going to go to a hybrid cloud? Well, I love this word, prosponsive. I didn't come up with it, but I love that word. So our clients are expecting, right, their expectations on how fast we can turn things around, how innovative we are so high that we really don't have a choice. How am I going to get that new feature, that new part, that new capability? My team can't build it that fast. How can I get that? Well, I can mix it. I can go out and I can get those, whatever that as a service is, whether it is infrastructure and I just need more servers, whether it's platform because I don't have that expertise and I want to build on top of that, doesn't matter. The key and the tough part is what's the balance. So this is not meant to reflect that there's an actual balance here, that security makes it heavy on one side. It's just meant to reflect that you have to come up with what that balance is between economics, speed, scale, right? What is the right mix for your organization? So in order to get there, in order to figure out what that right mix is, we tend to divide, Deloitte tends to divide things into categories or landscapes. When it comes to hybrid cloud, we work with 4 different landscapes. These are kind of areas that you need to consider. And each one of these we're going to deep dive into. And trust me, you're going to want to be able to zoom with your camera when we get to some of the later slides because there's really fine text on there. No joke. So security landscape, right? That's the elephant in the corner. It's always about security. That's always, you have to, whether it's policy, authentication, encryption, doesn't matter. Security is a heavy hitter in all of this. Your data landscape. It's not, I have seen many clients think that, well, I'll keep my data on-premise, but I'll move my compute to the cloud. Right? That's like the simple thing. Like, yeah, that's how it'll work. I can use the cloud if I just keep all my data because I can secure my data. Well, there's a lot to the data landscape. Everything from policies, what are the certifications that are required, how are you going to audit things? Oh, it's huge. It's huge. Your architectural landscape. This is both systems architecture as well as application architecture. So we club that all together into the architectural landscape. And then finally, operations and monitoring. And trust me, this is where it always falls apart. Nobody ever thinks about this. And this is, I would think, almost one of the most important parts. So, right, don't code load and hit the road. Instead, you have to code load and operate for a long time, doing it really well. So let's start to talk about security a little bit, guys. So have you heard the term cloud trust? Building your cloud trust? So building your cloud trust, these are the things that you have to prove. You have to prove with your cloud trust that these things can happen. And when you are looking at your infrastructure, your services, how the information is being managed, how the authorized users, are they who they say they are, if you have all of those things, you normally define those and figure those out by trying to figure out where your data is going to reside. Because where your data resides will dictate how you prove these things out. Does that make sense? All right. And yeah, I wasn't joking about having to zoom in, by the way. See over here. So think about all the things. When we think about security, we often think about, well, I have data in motion, I have data at rest, and now I have data in use, and I have to be concerned about all of these things. People don't often, at least the first time that they're architecting this, they don't necessarily think about the policy that's associated with it and the controls and the audits that have to go against it. They don't think about the vulnerability, the fact that the CEO or the CIO has to often sign that they know where every piece of data is at all times. That plays into your security, the set of concerns that you have around security. All right. Location, your data location, security around data location. I do want to say, I told you earlier I'd give you an example about one of our states. This is not easy. The security piece is not easy. In fact, no part of hybrid cloud is easy. It's not just putting an app out there. The state of Colorado, Kristen Russell, was one of the CIO, CTOs for one of the agencies there, and we were working with her. And she actually came to us and said, we believe that security will be better in the cloud. Of course, you don't want your client to see your jaw drop when they say something like that. But we really pushed her a little bit more. Why do you think that? What's the imperative? And she was looking at it from a cost and a skills perspective. She was looking in specific at Salesforce and some integration with Salesforce, but when she considered the cost of having the number of professionals that she would need for all of these concerns when it came to security, the need to train them, the need to vet them, that cost was actually a lot higher than going with a provider who signs on the dotted line that they're securing your data for you. Now she still had, there were still some, when they had some mashup, they still had to worry about getting it from the data center to the cloud. But she felt a compelling argument was that she felt more secure using the cloud. So let's talk about data, guys. Because obviously if we're securing something, we're securing our data. So when you're planning out this landscape, this part of the landscape, yes, it is about the size of the data, right? Where is it going to go and the costs associated with it? But it goes back to security, right? There's a segue from security. So your data security, what are the controls that dictate where your data resides? In some countries, you can't put your data in a US data center. I know I've been working with the UK, and I know that they've said no, we will not. They were using one of our systems. We have a SaaS offering, and they said, no, we can't, we won't use that. Because of the Patriot Act, we don't want our data in that data center. Lots of different types of controls around your data. The size of the data matters, right? Where it's going to reside has an impact, but the size of it matters. How much of your data do you want to put into the cloud? How much of it is going to be mashed up? If it's a hybrid solution, it's not all in one place. So now you're dealing with mashed up data. How does that impact the user experience, right? Another set of questions that all follow with that. If I have small packets and small pieces that I'm putting together, maybe that's okay. If I'm bringing together large groups of information from different areas, it could make for an actually not a very good user experience. The data demand, the profiles and what that means to performance. How big is the packet that I'm moving back and forth? So not just from an expense point of view, but where is it coming from and going to? Where's my data sitting? So Sebnem was telling me some different stories about data being in different data centers, in different locations, and when you're moving it across the network, how far does that data have to go? How big is that data, but how far does it have to go? And then policy. This is someplace when people really don't consider about the cloud right now. So they're not considering, what do I have to do when it comes to archive? I've got it all out there, or I've got part of it out there, or a piece of it out there. How am I going to archive when I don't own the machinery where all my data is now sitting? My data is in a bunch of disparate places, but I have legislation that says I have to archive it for 2 years, 5 years. I have one client, no joke, 99 years. Don't know what they're going to do with it or how they're going to read it, but it's a 99 year. So you can see there's a huge set of items that you have to consider, back to those considerations for the data landscape. So, Sebnem, do you want to talk a little bit about the impacts on architecture?
Yeah, so thank you, Tracy. When we look at the architecture, we're looking at from different aspects, right? First, we're trying to understand how ready are we for moving to hybrid or any type of cloud. So when we look at it, basically with the clients that we dealt with in the past and now, we're looking at their application readiness, meaning, how many users are using this application? What's the type of application functionality that fits into the cloud? What's the strategic fit in there from functionality, technicality perspective? And then on top of it, there's always cost aspect, right? It has to make sense because there's an effort behind it to move that application into the cloud environment. And in that cost perspective, I need to understand what's my integration points, what's my complexities, because this application is not going to stand by itself. It's going to have, downstream, upstream, other components that it's connecting to. So when we look at it, we look at usually, how functionality strategically it fits, what's the cost model for this application to move, what's the user group that needs to move. For example, I did a lot of oil, gas, consolidation, hybrid cloud readiness assessments. A lot of their applications are very scientific related. There's a lot of data in there. There's a lot of compute that is needed. Is it worth moving into the cloud and making sure that the data is secure and the huge data that needs to be accessed? It's not worth. And the amazing part is a lot of companies that do discover when we go into this Readiness Act to find out, what actually have on their premises, like what are the high-touch cases that they can't. They do need a physical hardware. They can't really cloudify them. They can't really virtualize them. And they keep finding those things out. So functionality fit, application readiness, and integration points and financial fits are those criteria that we look into. On top of it, this is the technical perspective. On top of it, what we need to understand is our operational model. How is your support? How is your end-to-end configuration management, change management, all the 7 IT layers is going to lay on top of it. Because now, by moving it to the hybrid cloud, the support, you have a shared support system. So you need to understand those integration points as well. So as Tracy says, it's not as simple as we say it. Requires a very good, thorough evaluation in the beginning to understand the need, the fit, and the cost behind it before you do anything. So the next topic is exactly what I kind of started with, the architecture landscape. When we look at the operations monitoring landscape, when you look at your environment, you're evolving over time. What I've seen with my clients when they come in, standardization is one thing we start, and then we start virtualizing their environment before we move into the cloud environment. That's the technical aspect of it. Then we looked at the operational model. How are you going to keep the environment moving? How are you going to make sure your capacity is always there? How are you going to make sure when users need you, your support is 24/7? Those are the biggest issues that we had to deal with because a lot of them are using hybrid cloud. And like I said, for example, take it ServiceNow. When they bring ServiceNow as your service provider, sort of, how is this going to impact your internal services? What are the integration points that you have to hand shift from one area to another area? Change management, configuration management, operational management are the huge things. So when we did that, we looked at all the policies, the standards, the documentation, and understand where the roles lay across. We needed to understand, who is managing this environment from roles and responsibilities perspective. Who is the single owner of operational management? So those are the things that came out. And believe it or not, it's much easier to design technically something, but then putting operational management on top of it takes much longer and a lot of effort to distinguishing those roles and responsibilities.
It's one of the places that we find that people don't look at this until I won't say it's too late, but they don't look at it until it becomes a critical issue.
Absolutely.
They haven't figured out what's the handshake, who's responsible, what's the SLA. If you're talking about a transaction that's flowing through multiple boundary sets, whereas each one of those handoffs has an SLA start and stop to it. So how do I log a ticket? Who do I log a ticket with? Who picks up the phone and calls who? It's all something that you need to be thinking about before you flip the switch, so to speak.
Exactly, and if you don't do it, there's always this shadow IT. No matter where I go, I always see them because users are users. They want to get things done, right? They cannot wait for the organization to keep up, to come up to the point. They go out and they get things that they need to. Are you going to put rules and regulations for them not to do it? No. You have to make the company to be their service provider, that instead of going out there, they're going to come to you. So you need to understand the basis of these demands and then come up with some kind of services catalog, services profile that you all understand each other, and you put the standards out there. They know when they push the button, they're going to get what they need for. So they don't need to go out and seek help from somewhere else. That issue is never going to go away until the company is mature enough, get to a point where they provide those services. It will always happen.
Can I throw a statistic in here? We've seen, as we've been sampling and working with different clients right now, everybody knows what shadow IT is, right? It's the idea that you're not doing what I need fast enough, so I go out and annex it, right? So I'm doing something else on the side, or somebody has their way around the organization. I don't go to Sebnem because she's never going to get it done, so I go over and I talk to John, and John gets it done for me, right? Different types of shadow IT. We're finding in the neighborhood a 6-to-1 known to unknown. So for every known, 6 unknowns that can be discovered as they start to do sniffing, because that's some of the things you have to do to prep for it, right? If I'm moving something out, right, what is actually happening in my organization? That's where some of the autonomics come into play and actually figuring out and making some decisions around it. 6-to-1. So I think that's kind of scary. Kind of cool, but kind of scary. And by the way, I am guilty of that myself. Wait, this is recorded, isn't it? Never mind.
So this is our last slide, which we kind of put all these different dimensions into 3 areas. People, process, technology. When you say people, how do you know you're ready for it, for the cloud? You know it because then you have your services catalog. You can spin up a new service at no time. You do have standards across the board. You can use extension of capabilities, your cloud service providers at any given time, right? So you have that. So this helps the companies to market their product faster because they have someone, if they don't internally to be able to meet it, they do have all these cloud service providers that they do have contract with. You do have an IT governance board. You do need that governance board because now it's not a silo way of managing. It's not what the server group said versus storage group said. It has to be shared responsibilities across the board. It's easy to say than done because all these different types of cultures, backgrounds, objectives, goals come into play because you're merging all of them. So that's needed. We need that kind of IT governance board. From the operational management process, your cloud services, your operational management should be cloud service aware. That impacts your configuration management, change management, your service management, all of it, you touch it. ITIL is great, it's a baseline. But how do you manage now your, for example, configuration management? How do you manage your CIs now that it's not a physical entity, right? It's all virtual machines, and you're moving from one premise to another. So that's a complexity. And you need to have those IT shared focuses. You do have an internal team of people maybe watching, guarding your environment, but when needed and you pull outside services, how do you integrate those 2 groups? 2 different rules, 2 different types of people. From the architecture and engineering point of view, you evolve over time. You standardize it, you certify it. You made sure that you consolidate it. You optimize your environment. And finally, you virtualize it, right? So you go through all these steps to do what? So that your environment is effectively managed, there's high availability any given time, your capacity demand, whenever the users need something, if it's unexpected, you burst it out to hybrid cloud. If it's something you can manage internally, you have it a private cloud. But at the end, you manage the capacity demand. All of these things that is required to build that technical environment. So if you look at those 3 buckets, those are 3 different wide and deep areas that you need to focus. And that's what we have been actually doing the cloud awareness activities, that we are focusing all those 3 areas.
So it's not impossible. It's absolutely not. I guess I should talk into this. So hybrid cloud's not impossible. As you look at it, there's obviously the cost-benefit analysis. How do you map the benefit back to the financial aspect of it? Because underneath the covers, what really matters is the dollar, right? As much as we don't want to say that, IT enables a business and business pays for IT. All of those things. So these are all considerations. As we said, the idea here is that you can walk away, you can take this and use this as a way to prompt your organization to think through. Like I said, it is not meant to be a recipe, because there is no recipe. There is so much variation, so much differentiation. You're going to have to address it for your organization specifically, or part of your organization. So if you have any questions, we'll open up and take a couple questions. Sure. Sure.
What are you guys handle non-functional company reputation and brand and make those decisions? Because a breach of the information across a hybrid cloud is disastrous for something. How do you approach that?
So everybody can hear that. The question is, what do you do about brand? What do you do about reputation if you are leveraging hybrid cloud and you're now dependent upon somebody else? It's a typical consulting answer. It depends. There's a risk. Seriously, there's a risk analysis that you do against it. How critical is this piece to your brand? For example, Deloitte has a number of SaaS offerings, and we are dependent upon some vendors for some aspects of the cloud pieces that we have underneath that. So there's a lot of responsibility, a lot of signature, but ultimately Deloitte's name and our brand is on the line for that. So we didn't enter into it very lightly. There were calculations on how much money could be lost, right? There are calculations on what it means to not just to the bottom line of the transaction not flowing through, if it's a per transaction or per user, that's not available to us. What happens if I can't edit my documents? I've provided a capability where we're doing online collaboration by 2 Deloitte people. What happens if Sebnem and I can't collaborate on that document? What's the productivity loss for it? So similar, we do those calculations when we're doing it internally. Some of it is based on the trust of having vetted that provider. So it might be that you use it for some of the things that you feel less risk for, like an analytic. I always go back to the Google Analytic as the easy one, right? Not really impactful. I get some good data out of it, but it's not going to take my system down. But do I want to bet the farm on Salesforce? It's a good platform, not putting it down, but do I want to bet my entire organization on somebody else? Depends. How much am I paying for it? What are my own capabilities? How do I match all those things that Sebnem talked about in terms of maturity? How do you match? Where are you here? All right. Thanks, guys. Appreciate your time.